Okay, thank you. So let's kick this event off by saying a warm welcome to the Solidify Show. It's a reoccurring event covering what we find to be interesting topics, trends, tools, practices in our field of expertise, and that we really like to share with other like-minded, like we do today. So my name is Malin Ågren, and I am responsible for the consulting business within Solidify, and I will make a short introduction before handing over to my colleagues who will bring you through the area of GitHub Codespaces and our experiences using Codespaces ourselves. A few words about Solidify at first. So would you like to, thank you, Magnus, change the slide. For those of you who know us by now, you know that we are and have been for many years very passionate about making software development easy business. This includes a strong interest in how to create environments for teams to have opportunity to be fantastic, creative and efficient by the use of the right tools, technologies and practices, which is really needed in these changing times and with challenges ahead. We proudly introduce ourselves as the leading Scandinavian consultancy, recognized as a Microsoft Gold partner in DevOps, in cloud platform, and also application development. And one of the first companies in the world to be GitHub Advanced Services and Technology Partners. Will you please change the slide, Magnus? On the slide now, you can see the numbers of Solidify roadshows that we have run through 2021. So today's event is one in a row of different topics that we have brought through this Solidify roadshow this year. And all of these shows can, as Magnus told you when he started off, be found at YouTube. We will be recording this one today, and as you see, you found it, Magnus just posted it in the chat. Today we are, as we said, looking closer into GitHub, and we did as well last year. So when you look at YouTube, do note that the Solidify Roadshow last year, 2020, actually had a specific GitHub focus. So you have a number, I think about 8 or 9 different shows on different perspectives around the GitHub platform. So again, today we're looking closer into GitHub Codespaces, and it will be my colleagues, Matias Olausson and Magnus Timner, that will bring this to us. So the stage is yours, guys.
Thank you. And if you have any questions during the session, just post them in the chat and we'll try to answer them as well as we can. So Matias, over to you.
Great, thanks. So Matias Olausson, CTO at Solidify. I live on the west coast of Sweden, but nowadays we work remotely all over the place. Have a long background in development, so this is a topic that's interesting from a personal perspective, and see how we can get new techniques and tools to improve the way we develop. Otherwise, I work as a consultant helping others be more efficient in delivering value to customers, and specifically around the engineering platforms.
Thank you, Matias. So what about me then, Magnus? I'm a principal DevOps consultant at Solidify. I'm also, same as Matias, a Microsoft Developer Technologies MVP. And I do similar stuff like Matias. I help our customers work in the DevOps namespace with all sorts of things connected to GitHub, Azure DevOps, and also Azure. So let's get started with today's topic. Matias, what about today's challenge?
Yeah, so we see a lot of tools and a lot of cool stuff coming out, and of course we're always interested in trying out the newest stuff and like to look at the new shiny toys, but it's always good to have a purpose for doing so. So when Codespaces came around, we started looking into that, and we will talk more about what it is, but it is a really nice solution for improving or helping out how we can make our development environments more efficient. So the way we wanted to tackle this is that in Solidify we have a lot of different products and deliveries, both as consultants and also building products. So we wanted to make it really easy for anyone to help out in the development. So it should be quick to get up and running, regardless of if you're working on your primary project or if you're going to help out a colleague. So essentially we wanted to focus on how we can improve the flow in development. And one way to measure this is a metric that some use in the industry that we call time to first commit, which means that how quickly can we get started on something new. If I come in new to an organization or if I join a new team, how long does it take for me to be productive? And it's quite interesting because you can look at it from the big picture, like in the list to the left, what needs to happen before you can actually contribute your first line of code in the team. So it can be the logistic parts like ordering a device, having someone approve it, waiting for delivery. Then you need to set up your device. Then you need to install and configure tools. And then you can start actually cloning the repository, getting up to speed, building the stuff and actually doing something. We have the benefit of having pretty good machines, but it's still the order process, even if for a small company like ours, can take some time, especially now when it's been a shortage of components and so on. So even if the first steps are pretty fast for us, the big chain is more challenging, especially if you jump back and forth between different projects. But then we also have non-functional aspects of this, like security. We want to make sure that our development environment is secure. Now working outside of the company network put some new challenges on this. Sometimes we're working through VPN, but sometimes we're not. Can we be sure that our home networks are secure, that our home devices, firewalls and whatnots are up to date? So we want to be able to code in a secure way without putting too much effort into it. Performance, of course, is important when you develop, both that you want to have good speed on your machine, but also that like we realize that when you get a new device, brand new install of the operating system, it runs perfectly. And then you start adding stuff, right? New tools, new version of frameworks and components, and gradually it becomes slower. So it would be nice to have a way to always have a fresh environment. Consistency, another important aspect. If we work together, we should follow the same rules. We noticed in our internal development that there is quite a bit of errors happening from using different operating systems. So if you're on a Mac, you might care more about case sensitivity than if you're on a Windows device. So that's something we can improve as well as having a way to share the common set of extension settings and other things that we use when developing. And collaboration and documentation are other things that we really want to streamline to be able to deliver software in a good way. So we started to look at this and look at our own ways of working and trying to figure out how can we do this better. So this was kind of a business case for us to start looking into Codespaces. So Magnus, over to you to introduce Codespaces.
Yes. So to help out with this long time to get commit started, we have a couple of different options. One is just to go to github.com and edit a file. I do that occasionally for like editing markdown files and other things and maybe simpler stuff, but I don't do, of course, any coding there. So we have a couple of other options. We can use the dot editor, actually. Some of you might have seen it or not. Just jump over here. So if I just press dot here, I get the lightweight editor here. It's quite cool, where you can do simple stuff. So it looks like Visual Studio Code, but you can't do all the fancy stuff you can do there. It's a simple way to do a simple editing. But if we go back to here and just show the slide here again, if we do want to get a full development environment that is not on our local machine, then we can use Codespaces. And what is Codespaces? Codespace is a cloud-based development environment it could be for long-time projects, so you can do all your coding there. Or if you just get a task to fix a bug or do a pull request, you can do a create a short Codespace that only lives for a short time. And you can work with these environments both from a web browser and from Visual Studio Code. But the big thing is it's the code and stuff, it's not on your local machine. So you can actually get a new development environment up and running in seconds. And I'm going to show you in a few seconds how it actually works, but you can decide what kind of VM you want to work with. You can up to 32 cores you can select. So depending on how big your project is, you can select different kinds of machines. The data is important. It's not stored in your local machine, stored in Azure, and it's stored in an Azure region close to you. It selects automatically a good region for you. You can, of course, change that as well if you want to. The model is a pay-as-you-go model, and I'll speak a little bit about that later. And you can also, I mean, originally use a GitHub created container image, but you can modify that as well. And Matias is going to show you that pretty soon as well. So let's go to our project. And here is one of our extensions. It's a scale extension that gives us this scale methodology or safe methodology in Azure DevOps. And if I want to start working with this, I can click on the code tab here, and I have the conventional stuff we usually do. I could clone it locally. But today we're going to talk about CodeSpaces, and here I can see the CodeSpaces I have already for this code. I can see which branch, and I can see how much is ahead or behind the code that is checked in. So let's click on a new CodeSpace, see what happens. Here are a couple of different machines I can select, 2, 4, 8, 16 cores, and I can also get 32 cores if I want to, depending on how big my project is. But I think I'll just stick with 4 cores for now, and let's create this CodeSpace.
You want to stick with that until you talk about pricing. So
yeah.
How much will it cost? We will see.
So we can see this found, and if I do, okay, I didn't have time to speak what happened, but it actually it found an image, created a container, and logged in. So here I have all the stuff I can do from Visual Studio Code, but I can do it in a browser. And Matias is going to go back and speak to you guys about the actual functionality here in a few minutes. But you can sync with your own settings from Visual Studio Code. You can add extensions and so on. So it's really cool. So that is the way you get started. But before you can get started as an individual, it has to be activated for your organization. And I'm going to say a few words about that. So let's go to the next slide. So enabling CodeSpaces. You enable CodeSpace for your organization. And I'm going to show you how to do that step by step. First, by enable it for the organization, selecting users, and show how to select all and just select the repositories. I'm going to also show you how to set a spending limit, or if you want to, you can connect to if you have a Microsoft Enterprise agreement, you can connect to your Azure subscription for payments. And I'm also going to show you a little bit about secrets in CodeSpaces. So let's go back to the demo here. So if I am on my own organization here and I go into settings, and I get this view, and here I can see various settings, and further down here we have the CodeSpace setting, where I can select first if I want to use CodeSpaces at all, disabled, or we have selected in this case to allow all our teams to use CodeSpaces. We can also select if we only want to limit it to certain repositories or all repositories. So we have enabled it for everyone here. So that's the first step, getting you guys to work with CodeSpaces on your own organization. Next step is setting up billing, because this costs some money to use it. And if we go into billing and plans on top here, we had CodeSpaces in the bottom, we have billing and plans here. So we can see the different billing we have for different parts of GitHub. We have actions, advanced security, packages, storage for action and packages, and here we have CodeSpaces. And here we can see how much we have used it so far. Not that much. We have a 4-core installation, used about an hour of data so far here in our demo environment, and we can see how much storage we have. So we have to, there's a difference between using a CPU when you're doing your actual data and data storage that you store over time. And if we There's someone who's not muted. Malin, could you check if you could mute that, please? Next part is setting the billing for your organization. If you want to set the billing limit, and we can click here on billing settings, and then we come into this picture here. And here we can see our billing for our entire organization. And we can set a spending limit here. And then we can limit spending for different parts. We have unlimited spending for actions, for example, but we have decided in the beginning here, we set the spending limit of $50 a month for Codespaces. And of course, we can have unlimited spending here as well. But as we are in the beginning of the process of using Codespaces, we want to take a look how it turns out and see how much people are using it and so on. So that was the easy part about setting up Codespaces for your organization. Next part I'm going to talk about is, let's go back to the slides. It's the actual costs. So we have two different kinds of costs. We have Codespace Compute, where you pay per core and per hour. So if we have a 4-core computer used in 1 hour, we pay 36 cents. And I mean, Codespaces only cost you when you're using it. So I mean, if you do something for an hour, it will cost you 36 cents. So you don't pay for 24/7 usage of the Codespace. And there's also a cost for the storage as well, because if you don't use your Codespace, you will not pay for the core, but you'll pay for the storage, and that's 7 cents a month. And if you want to look more into the costs, there's actually a calculator that I found here, where we can go into GitHub Codespaces, and we can look like we have a certain machine with a certain amount of cores, 4 cores. We have 1 developer using it for a week, and then we get a certain cost here. So we can kind of calculate how much it costs to use it in your organization. I'll place this in the chat as well. I actually forgot one thing when I talked about setting it up. There's also Codespaces secrets. I mean, for those of you who are using GitHub Actions, you know that you have encrypted secrets that you can store on organization level or on repo level. But there's also a new way to do secrets that you can store Codespaces on connected, or rather secrets connected to Codespace. So here I have just a demo secret for using my Codespace. So if I want to create a new organizational secret for Codespaces, create it here. Then I can select if I want to be this available for all repositories, just selected repositories, or private and internal repositories. So if you have like paths and stuff, different kinds of things that needs to be encrypted that you want to share between your Codespaces, that's a great thing to do it.
Because you don't want to commit it to code, no?
No, of course not. And GitHub has, if you actually do commit that kind of thing to code, GitHub has the dependency scan and code security stuff to the secret scanner and other stuff to find that sort of things out.
Yeah, so that's true.
So you will not be able to do that without getting a message about it. Oh, let's continue. Next part is how GitHub Codespaces actually work. So what happens when you start a Codespace? When I started it, it was just a few seconds, but you probably saw that something happened in the little box that started my Codespace. So what first happens is that a Linux VM and storage is assigned to your Codespace. And so far, it's just Linux, no Windows support for Codespaces. So, but if you use .NET Core and that kind of stuff, it's not a problem, of course. Then a container is created to that Linux VM and storage. And then you connect to the Codespace with a browser or Visual Studio Code. You probably saw that I had a little button to connect with Visual Studio Code if I rather would like to do that. And then there can be some post creation set up with like scripts that are being run for your Codespace and other settings like .files and other stuff. Matias is going to talk a little bit about that. And the Codespace as it's created only for you. It's only available for you, so no one else can go in and look at it. So it's your personal workspace. Codespaces are associated with specific branches of the repository, and the repository can't be empty. So you have to have something in your repository before you create a Codespace from it. And you can create more than one Codespace per repository or even per branch if you need to. But each user account has a limit of 10 Codespaces at a time. So Matias, would you like to take over and talk a little about how you set this up in an actual project?
Yeah, sure. So let's go ahead and share my screen. Over here. So all right. Am I sharing the setting up Codespaces slide now? Yeah.
Yep.
Great. So now we looked at what's required to set up Codespaces at the organization level. So next is to look a little bit more into what it means to actually start using it. So there are a couple of things that we can consider when we set up Codespaces for our repository, because it's bound to one repository. So that's what we're going to load, and that might be something that will impact how you decide to split up your repos going forward as well, so that it works in a natural way with Codespaces. But like I said in the beginning, we wanted to try this out, and for us we decided, out of the different things that we do that varies from .NET Framework to .NET Core to JavaScript to Node, TypeScript and whatnot. One of the things that we do quite a lot is that we write Azure DevOps extensions, and they are implemented as React components or React extensions using TypeScript. So we thought that since we are jumping back and forth, maintaining and developing these extensions, Codespaces could be a good technology to see how we can make development more efficient. So that's kind of what we limited this to initially for us. Of course, we tried it out with different environments as well, but that's what we got started with. And when we started, there is this virtual machine running a container with some configuration that hosts the repository, and you can extend it like Magnus talked about. So first we took a look at what the default Codespace configuration looked like and what we could do with that, because if that's sufficient, that's of course convenient. You don't have to spend time configuring your environment other than what GitHub provides. But if you want and need to, then there are other things that we can sync, which is nice. So at the personal level, we have the settings sync in VS Code. So that's a very easy way to keep my personal settings in sync with the different VS instances. If I want to customize other things in the environment, like my shell settings, other tools, then I can use something called .files, which is implemented as a public GitHub repository that will then, when the Codespace is loaded, get inferred to the environment. But if I want to customize something that's shared between every developer, then it is a technique called dev containers that we will use. And there we can customize which tools gets installed, what extensions I want in VS Code, all the different settings that should be shared. So there are a lot of different options to customize this with looks and feels, both in a consistent way, which I think is important for from the company perspective, but it should also feel nice as a developer. And I think we have a good option here. When we update the dev containers, that is something also to consider. So if we use the default Codespaces, like you saw in Magnus' first example, it just takes a couple of seconds to load. The more we put into the dev container, it will of course take more time to start up, because it will have to install the tools, extensions and whatnot. GitHub, they are working on a solution where we can pre-build our Codespaces, and that will reduce or probably remove all of the load time. But that's still in private preview, but it's a thing that is coming. So good to know.
So Matias, we got a question. Does
Okay.
it support repos with sub modules? I guess it should, right? Do you have any knowledge about that?
It should, yeah. So it's essentially it's just loading your repository, and whatever you put in it, it will load. So then you can do a lot of different things with configuration and automation within the Codespace. So maybe what we'll look at now will show a couple of those, answer a couple of those questions. So I think settings and this dot files technique is pretty simple or pretty self-explanatory. So first I wanted to share this dev container configuration that we have in the default configuration. So here we can go to the default configuration, and it's explained a little bit here. It's an environment that contains basic or common stuff like Python, Node, TypeScript, .NET, etc. GitHub CLI, Git. If I'm curious what it means exactly, in good manners, it's open source. So if I look into this file over here, we have all the different versions. So here we can see all the things that I put into the default environment, the VM and the Docker image. So there's a lot of stuff here. So for us, when we started with this, it was more than sufficient. And so far, we haven't had reason to add anything more on top of this. But as you can see, the list goes on. So there are a lot of stuff available to us in this sandbox environment. But if we want to, we can extend it. And if we want to do that, we implement a dev container of our own. So I'm going to go to our repository again and start up a Codespace. So this is again the same extension here. Just go and create the Codespace. But like I said, we use the default so far. It's working out all right for us at this point. I'll come back to what we think we want to do in the future. So now it's loading. I'm in VS Code. The repo is up and running. So in this case, I have the source code, the repo. I'm in this case the main branch. It actually detected that I'm running a node or a node-based application here. So while I'm waiting, it's doing an npm install and an npm run build because it detected that. So that gives me also a fresher and a quicker start once I figure out what I'm going to do here. So while we wait, I can click on CodeSpaces down at the bottom here, and then just wanted to show that I can add this development container configuration file if I want to, and then I can select the container configuration definition. There's a fair set of that with different configurations from Node to C++ and Java and .NET and so on. So in this case, we're building Node applications essentially with TypeScript. So I want to select this one using Node 16. I can add additional features. Maybe I want access to the Azure CLI and the GitHub CLI, and then I press OK. And what it does then is that it goes and creates a folder called dev container, and it adds a configuration file and a Docker file. So this is the magical file where I can go and extend my environment. So in this case, it added 2 features that I wanted, the GitHub CLI and the Azure CLI tools installed. It gives me a linter that it feels is appropriate for the environment that I have. And then it also points to a Docker file where I can have additional logic to customize my environment. In this case, it's extending or it's starting up from the base image, but here I can add anything that's appropriate to load into the environment here as well. So it comes in different levels. And I think if I go to this link over here, we can see that we have a schema that describes all the things that I can customize. So most of what I can do, or I assume all we can do through point and click, we can also do in this config file. But should I add something here, like I want to add an additional extension, then let's find one. Maybe I want, I don't know, I don't have time to think too much, but we want something for Git. Maybe I wanted a Git history. And if I wanted this one over here, then I need to just find the identifier for the extension and then put it into the to the description file here. And when I hit save, usually it pops up a dialog where it asks if it should rebuild the current environment to get this installed. But I can also trigger this from outside as well. I'm actually curious why I didn't trigger that already. But anyway, so this will reload the whole environment for me, rebuild the container, and so on. So that's part of what we can do. Yeah,
we have a couple of questions if it's a good place to take them.
Sure, why not?
So the first one is from Marcelo. He says, using CodeSpaces, how can we build more security compliance if the developers are connecting from different locations, especially if developers are using open source extensions exposed to the internet?
Good point. So, I mean, the code is running in a secure environment. It's isolated, but it is running outside of our network, of course. But it is also sandboxed. So I don't think we can do that much from here. So I don't know if I can probably, no, I can't use ping. So the machine in itself is sandboxed. But when I want to call out, there's a special mechanism that allows me to make calls to the outside called port forwarding. So as I see it, it's very controlled what we can do. It's isolated except for what we open up when we allow port forwarding into the container.
And also, as the data is stored in Azure, it's not stored on your local machine. So if you lose your local machine, you don't have anything that you can lose there.
Yeah.
The second question was, GitHub Codespace is available only in Azure or multiple clouds like GCP, and it's only available in Azure. And I haven't seen anything more about if it's going to be available in other clouds. Third question is, GitHub Codespaces have some relation with Visual Studio license, or do we need to pay double? Is it possible to disable users that already have a VS license? So this has nothing to do with Visual Studio. It's Visual Studio Code. So you don't pay for any licenses at all. You pay for the usage of it. And that's the data or the CPUs that you and data you use in Azure. And there's no way that I know of to disable you for users that already have VS licenses. Then we have a question from Patrick. Can this work in conjunction with GitHub Enterprise Server on-prem that is reachable from the internet? And that is a no. It's only available on github.com for now, but who knows what happens in the future. And that's all questions, all the questions for now. So please carry on, Matias.
All right, I'll do so. So I didn't see it before because I wasn't paying attention, but here I can rebuild the container. I won't do that right now. I think it will take a little bit of time, but we can do it after the last demo, and then we'll see it just triggers a Docker build and it will rebuild the image and restart the code space. So with that, that's essentially how we went about setting up things. We started to look at the default configuration. We found more or less everything that we needed. Since it's quite pure Node or TypeScript applications, React applications we're building, we started off with that. And then we can add more customizations as needed going forward. So the next thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about is to describe how we work with CodeSpaces and what a day in life using CodeSpaces would look like. So let's say we do the usual flow here. We come to work, we create the code space, and then start developing and collaborate that we used to doing locally, commit and so on. Just to have a sample of what that might look like. So what better than looking at it in practice? So going back to this guy over here, we see that we already started the code space. If I go to my profile and the GitHub menu here, I can go to my code spaces, and if it refreshes here, we can see that I only have 2. Been nice tidying things up. Both are on the master branch for some reason. So from here, I can open it up in a browser. Already did, so that's not adding much. And then I'm good to go. And this is then sharing my current state. So this is what it looked like when I left off the other day. I'm actually going to go back quickly to the CodeSpaces view here, and the little icon here is indicating that this machine, this instance of CodeSpaces is actually contains work in progress. It's not been pushed to the central or to the origin yet, or upstream. So this is something I probably don't want to lose. But anyway, so I can pause it in this state. When I go home, I can open it up again. And like Magnus said, it will be paused even if I don't want to when I'm idle. So it's not costing us anything. And here the editor is kind of the same. It's VS Code in the browser. It works just out of the box. So let's say I wanted to make a change here. Maybe I want to fix a bug that we or an issue that we have in the scale extension that's related to backlog priority not really working. So then I can try to find where we're using that. And as you can see, it's just a regular editor here. That's pretty much the usual stuff. But if I come to making some changes, I typically want to create a branch, and I can do that quickly here. So maybe I want to create a bug for this, fix backlog priority, or I'm attempting to do so. Then I branch as usual. I have the Git integration, so when I'm happy with my changes, I can stage them and push, and then continue as I'm used to. But first, of course, before I commit, I want to make sure that things work. So what I can do then is that I can use my usual commands. So in this case, I'm using npm run dev to start developing. And this is a fairly large React application, I think. So it takes a couple of seconds to load. But what's happening now is that it's building on the container, and it's going to start the application. And this is an extension that gets hosted in like in a web service. And just to show you, one of the settings that we use is that when it's running in dev mode, it's exposing itself over localhost on a certain port. And the way that we integrate this with Azure DevOps is that we deploy an extension to Azure DevOps where the extension is hosted in an iframe that then gets redirected back to localhost. And since it's loaded in my local browser, it will find the service locally. So right now I'm running this in the browser, and you might have seen that it flickered by a small notice in the bottom right that it's now starting to serve something on a port. So over here we can see that it exposed a couple of ports. So the 1991 instance is over here. And if I want to check it out, I can click on the open in browser, and it navigates me to a magical URL that gets generated, which makes this service available from the outside. This was one of the first hurdles that we hit, because working this way didn't quite work for us, because we wanted we needed it to be exposed over localhost for the for Azure DevOps to be able to load it the way we had set things up. Maybe we can change that, but that's how it's running right now. So this magical URL didn't do it for us. And the other thing is that it's also hosted inside with a developer certificate, which we need to approve. So I think that's why the bad gateway issue is coming from. So we needed to figure out a way to do this. And the solution that we came up with, instead of changing the wiring in how we load our application, we could actually run the Codespace in VS Code and get it to serve over localhost. So then it will serve in a different way. So if I go to a VS Code instance locally, so this is just Visual Studio Code, then I can click in the bottom left and connect to a Codespace. So if I browse over here, I have my Codespaces. Pick the expensive one because it's a little bit faster. So now it's connecting my local VS Code to the Codespace in the cloud, and it just takes a couple of seconds. And once this is up and running, because it probably hibernated the Codespace, then I just wanted to trigger the build phase again. We can have a look at that. Now it's going to serve it over localhost, which makes it easier to get started with. And if we really get into Codespaces and use this as a shared dev platform, we can of course change the way we expose things and connect the different services. But we wanted to get started simple. So let's start this again. Yeah.
So we have another question from Kevin. He says,
okay.
I have a lot of customers in the energy sector where regulations are strict. They have a lot of infrastructure on-prem. Would it be possible to configure a connection to these services through dev containers?
That's a good question. I have to think a little bit more on the scenario there. But for us, being able to run the container in a local VS Code, it gives us the same benefits that we have a shared definition of our development environment. It's running in a secure fashion in Codespaces. So we get all of that, but we also get the possibility to connect with the local environment here as well. So if I go to ports now, when I'm running this here, we can see that it's not getting this magic URL, but it's actually being hosted on localhost on the port that we expected. And then I don't know where I did with where did the terminal go? Okay. So yeah, it's almost done. So now it's up and running, compiled. If I go and refresh this guy here, maybe I need to go to localhost. Then see I can browse to the content over here, and we can also, if we want to, we can see that we can load the actual extension here from localhost. So this sort of completes the dev cycle for us. We have to step out of the browser instance in order to run it for real, let's say, to be able to develop. But once we do it like this, now the some kind of inception thing here as well, that Azure DevOps redirects to my local machine that runs the actual code that we see in the browser now in the Codespace in the GitHub data center. Then yeah, the rest of the things that we do is kind of standard things in VS Code as well. Like if I'm done, I just use the Git integration to do a commit. Nothing different there. I can go to the GitHub extension here to create a pull request, or for that matter, I can review others' pull requests from inside the browser here. So that's also integrated, but that's standard VS Code behavior.
Matias, we are running a little bit out of time.
Yep, and I'm quite finished with the Codespace is part of it. So once we get the sort of the integration with Codespaces working the way we want, it's essentially just work. And we connect to it locally or through the browser. We can stop the Codespace if we want to explicitly stop it. And then if we go home for the day, I go back to, I put it over here, the Codespaces view over here, then it will be available until I come back the next day. And if I decided that I want to abandon this work or I'm done, then it shouldn't have the little star, then I can delete the Codespace. Then I will clear up the resources altogether. If I had changes here that I want to start or continue with somewhere else, not in a Codespace, then I can also export the changes to a branch, and then it will create a branch in my repository, and then I can just download it using any other Git tool. So so far it feels like a pretty complete life cycle, and we get the backend in the Codespace, but the same behavior as we used to. Yeah, so I have a little bit of time to wrap up. I think in summary for us, what we have learned so far is that one of the smaller Codespaces, a 4-core Codespace, is about the same performance as my personal laptop, which is a Lenovo X1 i7. What we used it for initially, the building React applications, very fit for purpose. Really nice for this inner source culture, that it enables anyone to walk up to a repository, click on the Codespace, get the environment available to them, and they can start contributing in just minutes. If we add a proper or a really nice README file to the repo, that's the first thing you see when you clone and start a Codespace. Then you can have a nice way to help anyone get started. And for us, from the purpose that we have looked at, it feels secure and it enables us to be consistent. And we'll continue to explore this. We'll optimize, take more advantage of configuration. We haven't had the need to do much, but we'll see what we can do, and expand this to other scenarios, like .NET 5 or 6 works nicely as well. .NET Framework, since it's a Linux VM, it's not going to work, but as a motivation to move that code base to the latest, and then continue to see how much flow and how it reduces time to first commit and overall, and make sure that we measure the developer experience, so we feel that this is a good way to develop. It's not just a cheap way or a fast way. It should be good for the developer as well. So I guess that's pretty much what we wanted to share. Hopefully you've seen that this is an interesting and for us really exciting technology. So we really recommend it to you all to try it out. And if you want us, we will be happy to help you get started and apply some of the learnings that we've done so far to get you up and running. Yeah.
So if you have any questions to us, please reach out. We will post our emails and contacts in the chat. And I think we have one more slide, Matias.
Yes, sir.
So next time we are thinking of talking about composite actions, and I know some of you, our existing customers, are using it already. We think it's pretty exciting, so keep tuned. And if you want to follow us on LinkedIn, if you want to get a direct invite. And Kevin will get back to you about your question, see what we can find out about that. And if you have any other questions, it's a good time to ask them now. Otherwise, I'm happy you came here, and please come and visit. Yep.
Miles, I actually have a question. I was wondering, typically who would be responsible for making these dev containers? Would it be the developer themselves? Would it be people in IT or like people in the DevOps department? How do you envision, the workflow, I guess?
Yeah, from what I've seen, it's mostly the developers that knows what to put into the environment. So I would say developers because it's a development environment essentially. Yeah.
Okay.
But if you have a platform team or some DevOps support group, then of course they can share templates. So if you have a lot of 30 or 40 different extensions, then would be nice not have the teams to repeat themselves. So rather create a shared definition that you use as a base.
Great, thanks.
Right, thank you.
And I'll stop the recording. If you have any questions, we will hang out for a few minutes. And otherwise, you have a nice Thursday and hopefully get some lunch now if you haven't eaten already.
Sounds good.